Can't help myself but do this. I always do it.
I always ask the question,
If you were called upon to give your younger self, and then they've been really insightful, the answers,
What would it be, do you think?
what piece of advice would you give your younger self? Maybe one or two, and you think of what it might be.
If you sail back in time, give your younger self words of wisdom.
What would you tell your younger self?
A little bit of advice. I'm sure Sam will make a collage up.
Don't limit your ambition. You are capable of so much more than you believe. Anything is possible. Anything. With positivity, with energy and belief.
One was funny one that I can think of is I would have said if you visit Mexico, don't have the clams on the first night. If I think back to sort of the middle part of my career, I mean, I used to be somebody that got quite stressed about stuff. I would dwell on things, I would worry about stuff, and I could feel the adrenaline sort of pumping up me. And I just thought that there was something wrong with me, and I was maybe not well equipped with all that kind of stuff. People were better than me at dealing with that sort of stuff, and it was, when would that have been? Maybe about 15 years ago. I actually discovered how the brain works and what stress is, so fight or flight response, and then mindfulness as a way of just relaxing about things. Now, for the last, it took a couple of years to kind of master it, but probably for the last maybe 13 years, I've actually been like really, really calm, and it's been really beneficial for me personally and for my business life and my sort of family life as well. So that it would have been, message to my younger self would have been at the very start of your career, learn that stuff and make sure you look after yourself and that you're giving your brain a little break, and that things aren't really as bad as they might seem, because my first half of my career might have been a lot easier actually. So probably that would be the one bit of advice. I think we underestimate the power of the brain, and I think that most people are pretty intelligent, but I think what maybe holds a lot of people back is the resilience to this crazy world that we live in and this environment. So I would have learned that sooner.
It would be to not to be scared to focus on the things that really drive a passion and create a really sort of positive energy for the younger Simon, and in many instances I guess I did, but clearly there's always more that we could do in that respect, and and also to speak really openly and to be bold in terms of sharing perspectives and views. And I think for people who are perhaps in the earlier parts of their career, sometimes that can feel a bit challenging, and I don't think it's too early to start expressing a view and really leaning in with passion and energy to things that are sort of inspiring and keep you driving forwards, because if you do that, you're going to succeed much more quickly, I think, because it's just going to be a really sort of positive, energizing experience. So that's the sort of advice I'd give, I think.
I had to think about this because I just briefly I put your question, so I thought I'd better think about this one because it's interesting. I think that for me, every experience that I went through, and I've been through, I've fairly varied past, I would say, from starting my own. So I used to started and ran a digital agency back in '99, sort of early websites and that kind of thing. And then went into financial services. We used to do, I wrote an invoice discounting system for wages, and we became like 9th largest lender in the UK, and that went to the wall. And so in all those experiences, and then I went to work for Nationwide. And in all that experience, what I would say is that every point that you go through, no matter how hard it is, has a really positive influence on your later life. So the scars really make the later life much easier, I think. So I think I don't go and tell myself to try and to push harder when I was younger, to not be afraid to fail, because the failure is where you're going to win later.
There's got to be something about but just don't be limited by the horizon that you can see. Look beyond it. because there's a massive world out there, and there's a massive world of opportunity. And I think, whether that's like very broad, or even if I was thinking about that in the context of like insurance, don't be limited by your horizon, because there are so many opportunities in the market segment, and so many great opportunities. So yeah, don't be limited, I think, is what I'd say. And I guess by posing that question, my reflection is probably for a few years, when I reflect back, I probably allowed that horizon I could see to limit me, but not for too long. And I'm glad I stepped over it. And yeah.
So that wasn't set up. Well, I mean, it's something I've reflected on quite a bit, and I've spoken about it on LinkedIn, etc. And I suppose one of the things I would probably have to say is to be a bit more confident about my own abilities than I have demonstrated at times. So, I suppose I would sit in that classic category of kind of suffering from imposter syndrome at times. And particularly when you move into a business like Punter Southall, I've sat in rooms with colleagues with brains the size of small planets, and I have felt, cracking, what am I doing here? But gradually over time, I found that there is a reason that I'm there. I bring different skills, knowledge, different viewpoints, and I had a valued place within that board or whatever it would be, and I think it took me a while to get to that realization. And one of the other things I do within Punter Southall is I run our along with colleagues our mental health or wellbeing program that we call By Your Side, and we focus on a different topic each month. And this year we focused on imposter syndrome. And we've recently surveyed people's view of the program that we've run this year. And imposter syndrome was one of the most appreciated topics that we've covered.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people, do almost hold themselves back because they don't know whether they're worthy enough to be in the room at that table or whatever it might be.
Oh gosh, what would I give the advice to my younger self? Yeah, I think the advice that I would give my younger self is this sort of slightly messy one, but I've been on various courses, lucky enough that my employer sent me on various courses during my lifetime. And at one of those courses, somebody once said to me, you can't change. I think this was sort of a course to become a manager. And they said to me, you can't change people's personality, but you can help them learn behaviors. And I think, whether you're talking about your own management of your financial affairs or whether you're talking about it in your career, those words really linger with me in that, I can't change my personality. I can't change the fact that I'm quite organized. I don't, funnily enough, enjoy looking after my own financial affairs. And one of my learned behaviors, which perhaps will surprise people, but this comes from somebody who failed their maths 11 plus, is that one of my learned behaviors is, that I have got systems in place of how I organize my finance. And I'm a creature of habit, and I do those religiously. And I found my sort of happy place as far as those are concerned. And certainly I hope I've passed on to my sons, because I've got two sons with very different personalities, and I have very different conversations with them about how they manage their money. But the one thing I can't do is change their personality about it. Yeah. And I think it applies whether you're talking to the employees who work for you, or whether you talk about it relative to yourself, or whether you talk about it relative to your clients or to your family. And don't try and change their personality. So if they're a spender, don't try and change that, but you can help them learn behaviours about how much they're spending. For example, one of my sons, who's incredibly generous and definitely would fall into the spender category. He's put all sorts of mechanisms in place on his phone where he tracks his spending, and it's all very clever and it's all automatic. And that's a learned behavior because it's not his nature. Yeah. It helps him manage his finance. And so I guess that would be sort of my advice to my younger self is don't try and change me and don't try and change my personality. But, there are things that you can learn to make yourself, more effective, more, achieve the goals that you want to achieve by perhaps learning certain behaviors that are going to prevent you doing silly things because your personality leads you in that direction or just helps you amplify the things that you're good at.
Two things. One is I would never have listened to anybody who's got this much grey hair. So whatever it would have been, I probably would have ignored. So I should probably say that for the purposes of disclosure. I think I've been very, very fortunate, Paul, in my my work life. I've been very, very lucky. I've met a lot of people, and probably what I would do is I would say always use your listening skills. I think there were times in my younger days where I probably the proportionality of talk versus listening was probably slightly wrong. And I've learned so much as I've got older by listening to people who have experience on topics. I'm trying to, take heed of that. But if they know what they're talking about, for me, let them do it. Don't try to become an expert in something you don't need to be an expert in. It's hard enough being an expert in the one area. So listen more, I'd say, to my younger self and do, sometimes people with grey hair do have a thing or two that's worth listening to. Those would probably be the things I'd say.
Well, it's an excellent question. I'm going to give you a bit of advice that I actually did get as a younger person, and I give young people today. And I started my career as an accountant. And before I even did that, I went on a sort of experience, a couple of days with a large accountancy practice when I was 17, I think, at the time, in London. And I remember asking the partner, I said, well, what should I read at university, or what should I do? What should I study in order to become a chartered accountant? And he said, well, for heaven's sake, don't do accountancy. Do something that you love. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really good bit of advice. Brilliant. Because the main reason when I go into schools today, as I do very frequently, and I'm very passionate about getting our young people, particularly women, into IT as a technology business, is that don't necessarily think that you have to be a technologist in order to be able to be in the technology industry. And very often that, I think, it shrinks your capability, your level and your focus. But do something you love, because most employers don't recruit you for the fantastic things that you did at school or university. They recruit you for the personality that you are and the capability that you might be able to show them. And you'll show them much more if you talk about a subject that you did at university or college or whatever that you love.
Yeah.
So I would give all your listeners that focus, and whether they are young listeners to your podcast today, make sure that you do things that you really enjoy, because then you'll talk about it passionately. You'll be much more interesting as an individual, because you'll be interested in what you're talking about. And as a result of that, you come across much better, I think, to any future employer and any future individual. And I read zoology.
Put an accumulator on red rum, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's just the courage. To me, it's all about the courage of your convictions and following them through. I mean, I say that with my kids, and he's been lucky enough to study music. He's a musician, and he's been able to take it all the way through uni. So he's following his passion, his vocation, and that would be my observation. Your vocation, and been lucky enough to be able to do the both.
I mean, mine would have always been to have actually paid more attention and got my head down a bit more at school. To be honest, I think that was something I could have made a lot more of, and I didn't. And it's not till you're older that you appreciate what a gift that is. And trying now to persuade my daughter the same is going down equally as well as my parents trying to persuade me.
Yeah, it's fair. That's fair. Are we leaving you with red rum? Are we in?
Yeah, I think I would have encouraged myself to. I enjoy running, but I didn't start doing that until I was quite a lot older, because at school I don't think I would have thought of myself as any good at it. So I think I would have suggested that, and maybe don't care so much what other people think, really. Just do what you enjoy doing, really.
Yeah, what you love. Yeah.
Just do it, because especially with first businesses for people, they procrastinate and they think, oh, what if? And you know what? It's like everything. Don't worry. When you get to that bridge, you're going to sort it. It's one of those things. Tomorrow might never happen. So, my first bit of advice, people say to me, oh, you buy these companies, you sell these companies, you do it. And it's the first one, my advice would always be, just do it, give it a try, just take the action, take that first step, because that's the hardest thing. I had an uncle who ended up being CEO of a bank in Holland, but actually at one point he was in charge of a door-to-door encyclopedia sales company. He was a sales director or finance director. And he said, the hardest, and this is true of any salesperson, the hardest door for his salespeople were their own front door. And that's the same whether you're picking up a phone to sell to people, whatever you're doing, that's the truth. So, that would be my first bit.
Your go-to.
I guess the second bit of advice is don't worry if it doesn't work. We talked about hospitality, and I didn't profess in there to say everything's a success. Not everything works, but I'd rather try something and it not work and do it in the right way, and get it right for people. But try something and it not work, then never try anything at all. I hope that I've still got amazing things to come. I'm only a little bit on the journey, I would say. But, I think it's about just, better to try something than never try at all.
I think, to be honest with you, if I was given that chance, I'd probably tell myself just to be a little more patient. I quite like to push myself, hence me going up to work in the city and all those things. But there were parts of my career that I remember being frustrated at, but actually they've put me in the position of where I was then and now. I met this guy once at a boat show in Fort Lauderdale, a little bit of a slight name. And he said to me, I was probably pushing on and bleating on about something. And he said, oh, you can't fast track experience. And I thought, I was about to go back and I thought, right, no, take a breath, because actually, and I find that particularly now, where I can deal with things, and I'm not saying I know everything, far from it, but I can deal with things in a far more rational and well-rounded way than I would have done if I hadn't been there, done it, got the T-shirt. And that's probably something that a 55-year-old would say, and an 18-year-old young pup trying to push and push would go, no, that's absolutely nonsense. If you're good enough, you're old enough, to use a sporting analogy. So I think I would probably do that and just say, look, take a breath, enjoy the fact that here you are at Fort Lauderdale at a boat show, here you are talking to these customers in South America. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do find that one really good example, my wife and I were at a boat show in Italy. She came down with me, and they did on the Saturday a little sail race from Genoa around to Portofino. So I don't know if you know that well, but Portofino, amazing. It's where all the film stars go, and all. I think Mr. Rooney got married up there. And they had a reception on a mega yacht when we got there, and we were still on the front of this yacht, and this thing must have been 200 feet long, a proper boat. And there's people trying to take your picture and all sorts. And I just said to my wife, I said, oh my goodness, look at where we are. We're two folks from Southampton or Eastleigh area, and here we are stood in Portofino on a mega yacht with a glass of whatever going, and you think, life's treated me okay as far as that's concerned, for sure.
I wish I had done it a long time ago. And so my message to myself would just be brave, be braver, be quicker, be braver, quicker. And also I think maybe coming from consulting and helping other people build their propositions, know what you know, be confident about what you're saying, because actually not everyone has to like it, not everyone has to believe it.
Yeah.
Believe it yourself, and you're brave enough to say, no, that is the thing, I believe in that enough.
So I'm a great believer that good people come together and do good things, right? And there's, I don't know if there's a higher power or whatever, I'm not a great believer in that, but good people do come together and do great things. My advice to my younger self would be just make your mistakes early, because you'll make most of them anyway, and you'll learn and grow as a result.
I would say, on a serious note, trust your instincts, because smart data matters. And there were certain times when I was totally despondent, thinking I'm actually going to get mad in those 15 years. I'd also say don't waste time trying to define it perfectly. That was an awful lot of time spent and quite a lot of money spent trying to define it early on, and things, as we've said, move on. Say yes to crazy pilots. That's a must. Okay, there's some fantastic stuff going on out there, and just say yes to it. But probably The biggest piece of advice is invest in chocolate factories, because I've eaten a lot of chocolate over that time.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is act on your instinct, on your gut instinct. You know, the first milliseconds you feel about doing something or working with someone, I tend to always fall on that. And I think that's really important. And I think, secondly, you have to respond to change your circumstances with positivity. Life throws us all sorts of challenges all the time. Never get into the gloom and doom. You look for the positive. You look for challenges. Life is full of challenges. When you come across challenges, it's like flowing water. That's a good way of putting it. I like to be like water flowing down a stream. I've come across an obstacle. I'm not just going to stop at it. You stream, you flow your way around it.
Related to money, I think it's about trying to portion it out. So yes, enjoy it, but try and keep a little bit of sensibility on you and save for the future, because you never know what's coming around the corner. And there have been, I was in my 20s when we went into the lockdowns, those sorts of things. Whilst I'm not saying the next big unknown is another national lockdown, the point is we don't know what it is. And almost immediately, the first question on people's mind was about money. Almost immediately, it was like, well, what am I going to do? I can't work. I can't spend either. There was a benefit there, but ultimately just enjoy your money, put it to work, because you work really hard for it. So make sure it's working as best as it can for you and enjoy the benefits from it, whatever that might be for you.
Fantastic.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think just have more faith in yourself and in what can actually be achieved, because and get rid of that imposter syndrome very early on, because that was a big challenge for me. But it's enjoy it. I think enjoy it. Honestly, the last 30 years in the property industry have literally gone like that for me, and I was always looking for the next thing and what's going to be the next thing, what should we do. But actually, when I look at it now, it's like, just take in every moment, just enjoy it, and look at what you can then bring to it. And
amazing.
I love that.
Do you know what? I think one of the things I've learned over the last 10 years, which I wish I had that knowledge and experience of, is being able to eloquently help and work with people that are not in the back office to help them understand why you need to do things in a way. I mean, we've all heard this phrase in the past that, there's multiple versions of these phrases, like compliance. The answer's no. Now, what's the question? That's typically what a lot of historical people think about compliance. And actually, if I was talking to my younger self, I would say, you've got to work really hard, John, to actually help the front line or the first line really understand why and how it's important to do this stuff properly and well at the beginning, because it'll save you so much time, effort, money and energy if you do it that way round.
One of them would have been not to drop economics after 3 days because I fancied a girl in drama at A level to go and do drama. That'd be one. I wish I had got on top.
She might be watching.
And the other thing would just be, everything's going to be all right. Don't worry too much about things. You keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you keep taking those steps true to yourself. Things will always work their way out in the end. And
if you were going to give yourself a piece of advice, your younger self,